Cheers, guys. Epyx 911, welcome to the Elitist Geek VR news for Wednesday, September 7th, 2016. Let's dive right into it. So, a couple of days ago, I talked or showed Shane Norman's PVC rifle, and he's one of the viewers of this channel. A lot of you like the rifle. You know, he's since posted the bill of materials. He's done a follow-up video to that. And I had indicated that I was going to build one for myself. Now, most of the comments were pretty positive. There was one from DeCapper, not that it was negative, but he had said, you know, don't bother building it because it won't work. Now, I know Shane had success with his and it worked fine with the controllers on the bottom, but I got to admit, I was curious. Not that I was skeptical, but it always helps if you can see it for yourself, right? So I kind of had an objective for myself today, and that was, look, I want to have this under 20 bucks. I don't want to have to cut anything. I'm comfortable cutting it, but, you know, just to be able to show via a video what can be done, even if you have absolutely no skills with your hands, right? So the objectives were exactly that. No cutting, no glue of any kind, just using those PVC components. What could I come up with? Now, I'm warning you ahead of time here. This isn't the most prettiest piece of kit you've ever seen, but it accomplished what I wanted it to accomplish. Was lightweight, no glue, no cutting, at least sort of feel and resemble a rifle. I'm no gun expert. I think I've accomplished that. Even if it's ugly as sin, it accomplished all those points. And here it is, the VR rifle that I built. So this was done strictly from Home Depot parts, the bill of materials. Came in at about 15 bucks Canadian and works absolutely fine. So you can see I've got, you know, the Vive controllers. Now my back looks slightly different, right? It doesn't kind of come out as far, but it's completely modular, which is what I like about it. So all of these are just couplers, and I've, you know, change it up. I go 3/4 inch, 1 inch, 3/4, 1 inch. And then here for this portion, it's basically, you can see here, just comes loose. And I've added some duct tape, just some black duct tape, so that the Vive controller can slide in, have a little bit of movement, but not enough where it has to take on too much stress or damage the controller. And then it's simply a case of putting it back, squeezing it into place. No glue, no nothing. Works good. Meets all my requirements. If you're at all interested, I will just include the bill of materials below. But like I said, it's literally like a Lego piece. Anybody could do this, and it adds a lot. I've tried it in Onward, and I've also tried it in the Nest, and it works fantastic in those games. I'm definitely going to do more field testing, but when you're talking about parts, 15 bucks that you can return to Home Depot, at least the one around my house is really good, provided you have your receipt. Hey, experiment, try it out. So there you go. So thanks for that inspiration, Shane. Much appreciated. It definitely added to the gameplay, and with all the money I've been spending on VR, it didn't cost an arm and a leg. So very cool. Next up, the home network. Now, this one kind of got me excited. One of the reasons I've stuck to 720p for a lot of my videos is simply the bandwidth that I have in the man cave here. So I have a 100 megabit, roughly 10 megabyte connection, but I was only getting half of that down here. And what I should have done is when we bought this house, had them pre-wire it, because we had the window to do that, but with everything else, I completely forgot and it escaped me. We then had this unfinished basement. I still had an opportunity there, but for whatever reason, missed it. So my solution was to use the Ethernet over power line, PoE. And it worked great, but like I said, I was only realizing half of my speed. I was getting about 45 to 50 megabits as opposed to the 100. And connected directly into the router, I usually get 97 to 99 point something. So my maximum, I actually can experience that at the source. So yeah, that was kind of disappointing, but it also impacted my upload speed and everything. Long story short, it was a lot quicker and more efficient for me to rely mostly on 720p for news. Well, today that changed because I did an upgrade. So instead of the AV500s, I bought the AV1200. And sure enough, it worked. I now realize my full potential. So down here, 2 floors down, I'm getting the first speed test that I did, I was at 96.4 or 96.3 megabits. So fantastic. I'm happy with that. And I think the proof will be in the fact that a lot more of the content's going to be 1080p. So again, that's a TP-Link 1200. If you've never used these and you have an older home, you don't want to maybe, or a newer home, you don't want to, be doing drywall touch-ups because you butcher things, this is a fantastic solution. Where it doesn't work so well is you've got a really shoddy electrical system in your house. Yeah, then it can be pretty bad. But if it's a decent electrical system done by a competent person, these are fantastic. A little bit off topic, I talk about it because it does tie in, for me at least, to VR indirectly. First news item, the PlayStation 4 Pro, we found out today, is the Neo's official name. Now, I had all kinds of, nervous ticks going into today about PlayStation 4, Neo, VR. I told you guys the other day what was really bugging me was when it dawned on me that what I was seeing in all these VR games from Sony were either low polygon counts, low texture resolution, or in some games, both, i.e. low polygons and really old texturing. Now, I'm a guy who likes ASCII text games for roguelikes. Graphics, if the gameplay is good, I can handle bad graphics, don't get me wrong. But the whole point of the Sony is they tout stuff like 120 hertz refresh rate. When, as I pointed out in the video from the other day, they've got the equivalent to basically a 7870 AMD card. You cannot turn all the eye candy, right, just on a typical non-VR game and have it run a fluid 60 frames per second. It just doesn't work with that card. So you can see what my concern was with the Neo when I saw it was only 25% faster. Couple that with them throwing around the term HDR today. Did that bug anybody else, by the way? As if it was this new and amazing thing when PC users have been using it for about a decade. I got a good chuckle out of that. But anyways, I digress. The main point is, like that revelation I had about the low polygon counts, and textures being the reason they're going to be able to hit 60 frames per second, to then have reprojection fill in the other 60, that part made sense. All the pieces of the puzzle, though, today fit into place. It's no Rembrandt, definitely no Van Gogh, but I can assure you it makes a lot more sense to me now. And that's what I'm going to share with you guys. So here's my take on it. The solution is not going to be, if you want the best Sony PlayStation VR experience, it's not going to be as cheap as you think it is. You're going to pretty much need the Neo, even though it's only 25%. 25% can make or break experiences, believe me, especially in VR. So at the end of the day, when you purchase all these things, the Neo, possibly an additional camera. So if you have no camera like me, it's one minimum, possibly two. I would not be surprised given the state of Sony's tracking, which is easily the weakest of the bunch. Similar to Rift in that it's camera-based, but much weaker than Rift's. I've got this gut feeling that they're going to talk about needing additional cameras as mandatory for some experiences. So stay tuned for that one, but I'm sure we're going to hear that once it launches. So they do all this talk about 4K. So my thing is, look, 25% doesn't suddenly mean that you're going to be able to do everything at 4K. No, you're going to be able to add in some HDR, absolutely, to 1080p solutions. But the way they worded it, it was just so misleading at that presentation. Like suddenly they were going to be able to do 4K with HDR and everything else if you just buy this PlayStation 4 Pro. And that's not going to happen. You got to read between the lines and realize 1080p, perhaps, definitely not 4K for that. And remember, you're limited to 1080p on the VR. So all of that was just a little misleading and certainly wasn't clarified by any of the speakers that I heard today. So we will just have to wait and see exactly where that's going to go. But if the thought is it's going to be a cheap solution, you may be surprised at the end of it when you look at your bill that it won't be as cheap as maybe you initially thought. So as we get closer, when stuff gets actually substantiated, we're going to do that. We're going to break down these parts, find out what you need at the different experience levels, and determine how much that's going to cost you. Well, let's kind of move over and shift back on this next story to the PC side of things. Now, like I said, I don't favor a platform. We'll get into that on another news story coming up. But the simple fact of the matter is we are getting close to Sony's launch for VR. Plus, they've had a lot of conferences the last few weeks. It's natural that the news content that I present is going to be, more Sony heavy than it had been in the past. I still think it's going to be predominantly PC stuff, but there is going to be more Sony VR stuff. So if that's not your cup of tea, like I said, I always include the timeline so you can safely skirt around the Sony chat. So yeah, next up is Dexta, a company that I reported on a couple of times, the most recent of which was for their haptic feedback glove. And I just loved the potential of this thing. And in that video, I talked about what we knew up to that point in time, but I also did my share of speculation on what kind of direction I hoped they were going to go into. Well, they released a video today as part of their spiel on this, and it highlighted exactly that. Some of those things that we speculated about, we can now say are in fact happening and valid. Now, yes, videos can be faked, but I'm going to take them at their word, but definitely validate and verify once I actually have the kit in my hands. So let's talk about that video. So they show a few things, and basically it's what their SDK can do. The first thing that they show in the video is object selection. And at first thought, you may not think object selection is a big deal, but if you've played a lot of VR games, you know how frustrating it can be, especially with the Vive when floor calibration is factored in. There are countless times in the middle of a game, I drop an item, drive my controller through the floor. I'm surprised the thing hasn't busted yet. I've done that a few times. Ceiling hasn't been immune from that effect either. And then even when you do seem to be at its level, you can't grab it, right? Now, good devs have patched that and gotten around it, but still, it is a problem. So it was nice to see in this video that directly tackled head on. You can see all kinds of fine, motor skill selection going on with the items that he was interacting with in the video. He then shows individual fingers against solid surfaces. And there's one point in the video where he's tapping with his pointer finger a cube, just a regular, cube graphic, and experiencing resistance. Now that is freaking cool and has all kinds of potential because for me personally, and probably for a lot of you, clipping, going through environment graphics is immersion busting. For me, it's huge. It's easily in the top 5 list of immersion busting stuff. So this glove for that alone would make it worthwhile for me. And and then the last one, he's seen doing physics stuff, swiping a table in fake rage, right, and having the object scatter, but interact with his glove just in a really realistic way, throwing things, shuffling things. Again, the fine motor skills on display were amazing, and that is a direction that we know is coming, and I can't wait till we get there, because that's just going to be fantastic, especially cockpit games, because then you will be able to really interact with that cockpit. And up until now, doesn't matter the game, even the ones that, you know, were built to be so realistic, like Falcon 3 and Falcon 4. If you remember those games on the PC, you literally needed to pass an aviation course, 400-page manual to be able to know how to fly the damn thing. But you still weren't, you were interacting with your keyboard in place of the cockpit. What gloves like this and SDKs will allow us to do in the future is actually do it on the cockpit, which is huge. And again, we'll just add to immersion. Next up is the Samsung Note 7 story. And I commented on this a couple of days ago. This is where fanboyism can get really dangerous. There's a Reddit link that I'm going to link you guys. Have a look at that. You can see the reason this is important. It's the first, you know, I won't say evidence because it may be faked, but the first indication that we're not immune to this explosion or, you know, exploding or fiery inferno, whatever the hell you want to call it, effect with Note 7s. Somebody in North America, a few since then, have come forward with pictures of their own. And you can see some of the fanboys just slamming the poster. And I'm thinking, you idiots, you know, when health and safety, you know, don't tell people when health and safety is concerned that they're overreacting, that the chance is likely not going to happen. Look, if it was somebody in your family, your kid, you know, God forbid, has one of these on their head and it explodes. Can you imagine how awful you would feel? So that just ticks me off. That's what I hate about fanboyism. Granted, I was there once upon a time with the PC, and you know what? I suffered for it. I missed out on a lot of good gaming because of it. Haven't said this for a while, guys, but it's always about the games. Screw the individual manufacturers, right? Same with VR. Yeah, I admit I'm a fanboy for VR in general, but which vendor? No, could care less. It's about the games. So that's kind of the ugly side of fanboyism. And again, if you want my opinion on it and you have a Note 7, why the hell would you want to tempt fate? It's a free exchange. Granted, it's a hassle, but you know what? Your personal health and safety should trump all of that, in my opinion. And it's going to cost Samsung a pretty penny, rightfully so. Next up, Resident Evil 7 looks to bring some really, really good scares. I love me my horror movies, as you guys probably know. Games, same thing. A game to really scare the bejesus out of me. That's my idea of being an adrenaline junkie, not the skydiving or rock climbing so much. It's kind of through horror. So definitely going to be a first day purchase for me for Sony VR. Next up, Adobe showing its love for VR. And what they've had is they've got their Creative Cloud. Well, now they've extended functionality for Premiere Pro, After Effects, Photoshop, to be able to collaborate with other people VR content, which is huge, right? There's not a hell of a lot of stuff out there to allow you to do that. So having companies like Adobe step forward and providing that, whether you like them or not, me personally, I say all that, but I use GIMP because I personally can't justify the expense. But for a lot of people, Photoshop is kind of a must-have application. So having them step forward, fantastic. I think that's good. Next up, Casino VR Poker. I'm not going to waste a lot of time on that, but suffice it to say, I'm not a huge gambler, but for those of you who are, hey, it's coming to Oculus. Can't use real-life money. Apparently, it's in-app purchases. $20 US, $19.99 gives you 100,000 chips, poker currency. And that's because of Oculus and Vive. I mean, they're just against gambling via their software. Not to say there's probably not going to be stuff behind the table, right? But that's up to the individual users. Probably sucks to get caught. I'm sure there'd be bans or whatever. But hey, neither here nor there. If you're into gambling, you've got that to look forward to on the Oculus Touch. And, you could do a whole video on that. Just fascinating. The whole poker, lots of gambling relies on tells, body language. And that's, for me, where I think AR can have a huge leg up on VR because it can incorporate, the ability to read tells and observe body language by kind of doing the inverse of what we think of AR, right? Like the Pokemon Go, which is real environment, imaginary character. Well, for gambling, you could do the opposite and have fake environment, real character, right? So that will also be coming to the Vive. But right now it's available, cross-compatible between Gear VR and Oculus Rift. Next up, last story here is involves a company called iStaging. They were part of a Taiwanese contest. They won $100,000. They've now managed to secure $5 million in an additional round of funding. And their whole claim to fame is improving the real estate experience. So to date, real estate, yeah, you've got places like in my area, it's multiple listing service, I believe it's called. You can do some really horrible fish lens 360s of places, but being able to walk around them, poke in cupboards, all that kind of stuff, to me would just be huge because it would allow you to, I don't think we're going to be at the point yet where you would buy a house based on it, but certainly use that functionality to narrow down your short list of candidates, right? And then go see them in person. So all kinds of cool potential there. Guys, you know what time it is. It's game time for me. Cheers as always, and definitely catch you on the VR flip side.